All right, and I think we're live. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Benjamin, how's things?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Yeah, it's Wednesday, so
Middle of the
February's
week.
coming to a close. That's always a good sign. It gets warmer. I don't know where you are in the world, but it's miserable here in the UK around winter time. So,
Well, I'm in France, so not so far. We're sharing some class, I guess.
yeah. Fair.
Let me just check, just because these past few days you have to check with Twitter that with X that everything's going okay. But yeah, we are live, so
Good,
that's good to
good.
know. I have this big banner saying double check because you never know. So that's cool. Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about DeFi. We're going to talk about privacy. We're going to be talking about yield infrastructure and stable coins. So a lot of buzzwords, but the main topic is to talk about Neox. You're going to be able to explain what's it all about. So I'm Benjamin. I'm part of the marketing team at iExec, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, good to connect on the stream. I'm Jeff, founder of Neox. Neox is autonomous stablecoin yield infrastructure. So, essentially, we can get into it, but essentially, how do we bring stablecoin yield to the products that people use every day, right? So, there's a great opportunity to create wealth within DeFi, but it's very inaccessible. The learning curve is quite high. There's a lot of risk when you don't know what you're doing. But how do you, give that yield to people in a banking app, a neo banking app, a fintech app, or even sort of consumer apps that they can use day to day? And so, we've been on a journey of reiterating and refining, I suppose, to get to this point. And you can sort of see a lot of people are heading in the same direction, right? But where we sort of differ is we sort of offer a deposit once, earn everywhere approach. So, you can deposit on one chain and earn on several other chains automatically. Each day it could rebalance to a new chain, but the user has zero complexity, right? So once they deposit their US dollars, as long as the neobank has the sort of setup to take fiat on ramp, they can then earn across this vast DeFi ecosystem without ever knowing. Um, they can check it, but without ever having to know where their money is. But you can see it on chain basically. So that's the gist of what we do, and happy to dive into a little bit more information.
Right. Yeah. It is a very competitive market, so you do have to differentiate yourself. When did you start thinking about this project? Because I can imagine how you have to iterate very quickly, looking at where other solutions come forward and what type of technology pops up. When did you start thinking about doing Neox?
Yeah, so we actually started probably, I would say, late 23, so quite a while ago. And we were sort of building in what was known as the AI-fi space before one day we woke up and it was called DeFi, just randomly. So we were building out this idea, right? Because this came about from the failings of centralized money markets like Celsius, BlockFi, and a few others. They offered great returns, but ultimately, whenever they failed, and most did fail, they take your funds down with it. And the great part about decentralized, markets is that it's non-custodial for the most part, right? So, yes, there is risk, but ultimately, if the company goes down, you can still access your funds. And we thought, well, how can we make that as accessible as something like Celsius? And then we sort of built out more of, let's say, a business to consumer approach, so B2C, which is not too dissimilar to the likes of Giza and Sale Money and Zi-Fi and a few of these other sort of projects. I would say we were around the same time as probably Giza. But ultimately the organic volume isn't really there in DeFi, right? Users, the majority of money in DeFi is LPs, whales, people farming tokens or farming yield. The actual amount of money from the regular users is tiny. And so we said, okay, well, this really isn't the way forward, right? You can't just have an entire industry running on farming rewards, and farming tokens, and hope that it will last. There must be a better way to do this. And so we pivoted to B2B, I would say probably in the middle of last year. And so we've gone about it that way. But yeah, there's been iterations within that as well. How do we approach yield optimization? One of the big differentiators is the cross-chain approach that we've used versus some other solutions that use single chains. And there's reasons for that as well, I'm sure. But yeah, that's sort of how we came about, and why we adapted what we were doing.
Right. So you mentioned B2B. So you mean who is your client? Is it like neobanks, apps, fintech applications? Is that it?
Yeah, so if you want to go on the crypto front, so without the fiat on ramp, you'd look at Web3 neobanks, you'd look at wallet providers, casinos, for example, gambling platforms, perp dexes, anywhere that has sort of capital sitting there, primarily stable coins at the moment, where people would like to make some yield while their capital is sitting idle. Right, that's sort of where you're looking at. The bigger version of that then is to build the fiat on off ramp, right? So the user deposits $10,000, but they actually earn in USDC under the hood without knowing it's USDC. That's sort of the next phase, and we would be the tech provider in that circumstance. It would require on them having the licensing and them having the sort of on off ramp solutions in place.
Right. So, and then let regular folks invest in stable coins without them necessarily understanding the whole stable coins, right? Is that the
Yeah,
plan?
like it sounds risky when you say it that way, and there is a certain element of risk, you know what I mean? But the way I sort of say it is, your bank is offering you, let's say, 1%. If you're a new neobank coming onto the market and you want to be competitive, you can say, well, I'm going to offer 6% yield in a savings account, and that's going to be our differentiator. But we don't want to build out all of this infrastructure. We don't want to understand, how to build a product on chain, what the risks are involved with that, the ML solutions that we've built, from a risk mitigation point of view. We don't want any of that hassle. We just want to plug and play. And so that's what we're trying to provide. But like I said, the great thing about on-chain strategies is that it's all transparent, right? You can see where the funds are allocated. And so there is a level of transparency there if the people want to actually see where their capital is being used.
Okay. All right. So, have you been talking with these projects, with these banks? What are they looking for? Because always we mentioned they have like multiple options, and they obviously are already trying to optimize their yields. What are they interested in with your infrastructure?
Specifically, what they love about our infrastructure is the fact that they can deposit on any chain and earn across the entire network, right? So when you look at like API providers currently, they'll say, oh yeah, we can support, deposits of USDC on Ethereum and you'll earn on Ethereum. And that's great. Or we deposit, Polygon and you earn on Polygon, or you deposit on Base and you earn on Base. What they like about what we offer is you can actually deposit on any of those chains. Currently, we support 4 chains. With more coming in the next few months, and 12 by the end of the year is the goal. But ultimately, you can deposit your USDC on Solana because that's where it's easy and that's where you have your capital. But tomorrow you might earn on Base without needing to do anything. And so it's the fact that you have that full automation in place, that sort of cross-chain, abstracted, interoperable setup that's different to most other providers out there. There are limitations because we were going after stablecoins specifically. Some of them want some additional, how can we earn on ETH or how can we earn on Solana? That's stuff that we can add later on if there is demand for it. But obviously, stablecoin seems like the most sense as a place to start.
Right. And so, in what would be the ratio of customers that are ultimately looking into crypto and what would be the ratio of stable coins or fiat, I guess?
Sorry, in what sense do you?
These applications, their customers tend to be looking to invest in crypto, or
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, it's primarily crypto at the moment. I think,
Okay.
you are there. There is interest, I suppose, in how can you offer people the ability to earn on their dollars. I guess the issue there right now is up until recently, there hasn't been much clarity from a regulatory perspective, particularly in the US. And in the EU, there still needs to be a certain level of custody over the funds, right? You can't have a fully decentralized approach where you can just deposit your euros and earn in a decentralized network that you've got no control over, counterparty risk and all these other things that really matter. So it's been difficult, I'd say, but there is an appetite there. But it's really also about understanding the risk, I would say. And
Right.
up until about a year ago, I think there was a very much this is sort of very scary to go into world, which I completely understand. But with the emergence of the likes of BlackRock Build, Aave coming into probably the consumer market soon and having the history that they do with $50 million in TVL, like there's a lot more let's say, trust in certain institutions within that space, which has made it easier to pave the way. But right now, we're seeing a huge interest on the crypto side specifically, which makes sense, right? You got a layered approach. You go crypto, and then you go fiat after that, and so it's just a natural trajectory, I would say.
Right. And you were mentioning US and EU. Then what are the markets on which you think the adoption will just be easier on a regulatory standpoint?
Um, I think the actual easiest adoption is outside of both the US and the EU. Being
Mhm.
honest, I think whereas a bit more sort of flexible in their approach, like the UAE, for example, is pretty open. South America has pretty openness to that, and there's other ways you can use stable coins, like USD denominated stable coins. For example, if you got Mexican peso, but you want to save in US dollars, you can have that conversion of pesos into dollars, into USDC, and you can earn in USDC, right? So, and there are conversations we've had with some banks around there around that sort of ability to do that. But I think a lot of the bigger money will be in the States for sure, because it's just a bigger market, and they tend to not be as risk averse as certain EU countries that I've come across.
Right. So at the beginning of your products, you look at wider markets and then focus on like the US market. And for sure, we have, so obviously at iExec, we're all about privacy, but we also know just how important it is to be compliant in the way you think things and make sure that even the privacy has isn't necessarily contradicting with the idea of being compliant or going with regulations. So that's for sure something that you point out very clearly, how at some point on your roadmap you do need to get with the American and EU markets for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we talk, so Neox has integrated iExec in your infrastructure. Could you? So I know you're not the tech guy, and but could you like very simply explain how iExec is implemented, and I guess from a customer standpoint, how does that impact the product?
Yeah, so like I think I highlighted with you as well, I'm not the technical guy, unfortunately. So yeah, I'll do my best to speak about it in a simple way. But so the thing with these sort of agentic technologies, right? It is non-custodial, as they say, but you do have to give permission. You to give your keys basically over to the technology, if you will, to execute those trades on your behalf. So moving from one protocol to another, that happens autonomously because our system has access to the wallet. But obviously, when you're moving funds around and you're using private keys, making sure that those keys are never visible to anyone, not even us, is extremely important, right? And so that's one way that we're using, obviously, iExec in the privacy setting, is to make sure that those keys are protected at all times, that nobody can access those keys, not even us, so that even though you're giving control of your wallet over to, let's say, an agent, ultimately it's still secure, right? So that's one of the major ways that we're doing it. And then we're also using it on the rebalancing side of things, right? So we use our sort of yield rebalancing operations inside of a verified environment, so that when the agent withdraws from the likes of Aave, bridges USDC to another chain, and then deposits again on another protocol, all of that happens within like a sort of secure environment with sort of cryptographic proof, I think is the term that was used.
Mhm.
So basically it remains like super secure at all times.
Right.
And so that's sort of how we're using it, and from a privacy perspective, but mostly a security perspective. I think security is something that we really focus on heavily. If you're going to bring DeFi, especially to the masses, or you're going to bring it in the mainstream product, like, you have to be security first. And I think that that's a mindset shift that still needs to happen in Web3 to a certain extent. I think people chase these massive yields with these black box strategies with unknown risk, unknown leverage, because it's the flavor of the month, and people still FOMO into these things. And yeah, I think it's starting to shift, but probably take a little bit longer.
Right. Well, what you're touching at is, it's funny because today is also the day we're releasing the iExec manifesto, kind of giving people the vision as to how iExec wants to implement itself, and it's right there on our Twitter feed. So if guys can go check it out. I didn't read it, but I didn't write it, but I read it. It's super interesting. And there's one point that echoes what you've been saying, how today it's not so much about blockchain was for the longest time about transactions per second and just scaling, and now the importance of securing. So in your case, it's keys and balances, and what you've been saying checks out with the. I checked with our tech guy to to understand exactly the integration. He did say that the keys and the transactions and balances are secured and confidential. Those are definitely those are primitives that all of a sudden become extremely important in blockchain, in crypto, much more than it ever was. And so I think we're just seeing the shift right now. Everybody was considering privacy like the latest trend that will last for a few months, but I think it's more transformational than that, and we're really going to see over the next year the infrastructure in general shift towards being more confidential, securing the data in a more profound way. So yeah, I think you're hitting it pretty well with the Neox products. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the privacy meta is interesting because I've always maintained, and I still maintain, that the vast majority of normal people don't care about privacy, but they care about convenience, and that's
Right.
very evident with TikTok, right? You tick I agree, and TikTok wants access to your firstborn child's blood type and all this sort of stuff, right? Basically, or might as well, and people are happy to sign that over so they can just doom scroll on TikTok and watch videos. But what is super important and will always remain super important is the privacy under the hood, right? So transactions, masking it from potential malicious actors and harmful actors. I think that privacy in that regard is super important from the technical infrastructure piece, right? And how can you keep it as secure and as private as possible from other parties that might want to attack your infrastructure? I think people forget about that part, and it's that privacy and it's that that security piece that allows people to be able to use the financial apps and whatever else it is with ease and without worrying about what's going to happen to their money. And so people might not place a lot of privacy importance on themselves, but actually they place a huge amount of importance unknowingly on the apps that they use every single day. And I think that that's something that people need to be aware of. And that's why it's not going to be a meta. It's always going to be super important.
Right, absolutely. Well, for sure, people don't care about privacy, but it is also true that it enables use cases that we just don't realize that we don't move on some use cases because of privacy issues. And I think finance is definitely one of a very good example of that, where um, especially the institutional finance TradFi was not going to move one bit on chain if they have all these business tactics, all this very private data, all of a sudden being on chain. And so that's a situation where it's not so much, okay, you have something that works well, let's add privacy to it. It's more privacy will enable this use case to actually happen. So
Yes.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. And so I guess it's more of a question for your tech guy, but integrating iExec on Neox, do you know if it was a smooth transition, or how did that go?
Yeah, I know because I was in the group, thankfully, so I saw a lot of questions coming back and forth. I think there was, I mean, overall, yes, it was smooth. There was some delays on our end due to, certain rate limits with some of the tech providers we're using, so we had to wait a while. We use cross chain, we use CCTP, which takes 20 minutes or 30 minutes for a cross chain transaction to happen. We don't use traditional bridging; we use burn and mint mechanisms. It's safer, it's more secure. But that means whenever he's trying to test it out, he has to sit there and wait for it to happen, which takes time to test. But what I will say is, working with you guys, your team has always gotten back very quickly. Any questions they have, they sort of send over either documentation or some information about what he should do next. So it took time from our end, but whenever we had questions, I think it was very quickly responded to on your end, and I think it's been a very sort of smooth process, which has been great. So yeah, good
Cool.
support.
That's always good to hear. So I know you, so you guys are at the beta phase right now. What's on your roadmap? Are you, what are the next steps?
Yeah, so I mean, we still because we built out B2C initially, we sort of kept that interface so that people can use it. So obviously, when you launch a token or whatever else, you want people to actually be able to see and use the technology, so you can actually look at a proof of concept. Right now, we're still building out the sort of we're adding more chains, adding more protocols, getting more interested in the API. But really, 2026 is about building infrastructure, I would say. Really building all the plumbing, working on the sort of the ML AI engine that we've built, which has three components to it, which is yield forecasting, risk mitigation, and routing. So building on that, making that more intelligent over time, and then towards the end of the year into next year, we'll probably be looking at doing a lot more integrations. When it comes to, I'm sure maybe you see this as well on the institutional side, like having the tech is one thing, having a proof of history of security and performance and back testing data and being able to look at all that and go, oh, these guys have been around for a year, this is all they've done, we can probably reliably use them now, rather than them being the first one to market with potentially bugs or issues on board. So yeah,
Right.
it's a slow process, but it's a process nonetheless.
The first use cases are the most important because they build
Yeah,
the trust. You get out the kinks and everything. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for spending the time and going over this. It was a nice chat.
you too. Thank you so much, Benjamin. Appreciate the time. All the best.
Thanks, guys.
See
Bye.
you guys. Bye bye.